Well, good morning, fifth grade. I hope you had a great Mother's Day weekend and you showed your mother, grandmother, or whatever mother figure is raising you a good day and appreciated them. I know I felt very appreciated by my kids and I'm glad I get to be their mom. So today we are going to talk about adding and subtracting mixed numbers. Let's just remember real fast what a mixed number is. A mixed number is a whole number and a fraction put together. So like 1.5, that's a mixed number because you have 1 and then half of 1, okay? You have a whole number, and remember a fraction is part of a number. So 1.5 is a mixed number. Okay, so we're going to add and subtract mixed numbers. Now for today's lesson, for Tuesday's lesson, we're going to use fraction strips, okay, so that you can see it. All right, so if I have one, this is one whole. If I have one whole, 1 2/3, plus 1 1/3, what am I going to have all together? Okay, well first we're going to add the fraction part, okay? So if I have 2/3 plus 1/3, what does that make? 3/3, which is the same as 1 whole. Okay, so we're going to add the fraction part first, okay? When we're adding the fraction, when we're adding mixed numbers and fractions, mixed numbers, we're always going to add the fraction part first, kind of set it aside, and then add the add the whole numbers, okay? And then add them together. Okay, so I am going to have 3/3, which is the same as 1, all right? Put that off to the side. Okay, and then I'm going to take the whole numbers. I'm going to add the 1 plus the 1. I only have one fraction strip for 1. So I'm going to add the 1 plus the 1, which makes 2. All right, so now I have 2 and 1 whole added together makes 3 wholes. All right, so when I'm adding mixed numbers, sometimes it's going to make a whole number, but most times it's going to make a larger whole number and a larger fraction, okay? So remember, when we are adding or subtracting fractions, they all have to have the same denominator, okay? You cannot do anything until they have the same denominator. And how do we do that? We find the least common denominator and multiply the top and the bottom by the same number in order to get the same denominator. Okay, we talked about that in our last lesson. Okay, now subtracting is a little bit more difficult, okay? Because let's say that you have, I'm gonna write it on a piece of paper. Let's say that you have 2 1/4 minus 1 3/4. Okay, I actually took the one from your book. So let's say we have 2 1/4 minus 1 3/4. Okay, you cannot take 3 from 1. So just like with regular subtraction, you have to borrow, okay? But this time we're going to borrow from the whole number. So if we're borrowing 1 whole from the whole number and we're turning it into fourths, how many fourths are you going to give to that 1/4? Okay, well, let's find out. I have my fourths here. How many fourths are in 1 whole? Well, we know by the denominator, because that tells you how many pieces it's broken into. So 4/4 makes 1 whole. So if I'm going to borrow from the whole, I'm going to give it to this one. I'm going to give it 4/4. Okay, so now I'm going to have 1 5/4 minus 1 3/4. Do you see how I did that? I took 1 from the 2 and I gave it to the 1/4, okay? But I had to give it in fraction form. So I gave it 4/4. So now I have 1 5/4. It's the same as 2 1/4, okay? But I gave 1 whole to the fraction 1/4 and made it into 4/4. Okay, so now I can subtract 1 5/4 minus 1 3/4 equals, well, first I'm going to do the fraction part. 5/4 minus 3/4 equals 2/4. Okay, and then 1 minus 1 is 0. So is 2/4 the smallest I can make it? No, because I can divide the top and the bottom both by 2. Remember, that's the greatest common factor. And I can reduce it to 1/2. Right? So the answer to 2 1/4 minus 3 1/4 is going to be 1/2. Okay? So if you look on page 472, it shows you exactly how to do it using fraction strips. Okay, now obviously you're not going to sit and use fraction strips every time you add or subtract mixed numbers, but this shows you how you can borrow, especially for subtraction, how you can borrow fractions from the whole number. Okay, if you look on E and F, it shows you what we just did. Okay, all right, so I want you to look at check on page 473. It says find each sum or difference. Remember, a sum is the answer to an addition problem. Difference is the answer to a subtraction problem. Simplify the answer if necessary, so reduce it to its lowest form. You may use fraction strips or draw pictures to help. You may not have fraction strips. You know what you can use are Legos, okay? So, or you can draw pictures. So it says 3 3/4 plus 1 3/4. Okay, let's do this one. I'm going to do this one out on paper with you because you're going to see what we need to do to both sides of the problem, the fraction problem and the not whole number problem. Okay, part of the problem, and then put them together. I love fractions. All right, so 3 3/4 plus 1 3/4. Okay, remember, when we're doing adding of mixed numbers, we're gonna do the fraction side first, and then we're gonna do the mixed number side, or the whole number side, and then we're gonna put them together, okay? And do what we gotta do to the fraction side before we add it to the whole number side. So right here we have 3 plus 3 equals 6, okay? So we have 6/4, okay? And then we have 3 plus 1 is 4, okay? So right now we have 4 6/4, okay? So let's see what we can do to the 6/4 in order to make that proper. Okay, well first, it's an improper fraction because there's a larger number on the top than the bottom, right? So we're going to divide the top by the bottom, Okay, so what is 6 divided by 4? How many times does 4 go into 6? 1 time. With how many left over? 2. Okay, so now I have 1 and 2/4. All right, before I give that to this, what can I do to that 2/4? I can reduce it, okay, and make it 1/2. Okay, so now I have 4 and 1.5. So what do I do with that 1? I give it to the 4, okay? So I have 5.5 as my final answer, okay? There are steps. They're not hard steps, there's just steps, all right? You gotta make sure that we get to all the steps, all right? So we do the fraction first, leave it alone, then do the whole number, and then figure out what we need to do with the fractions and then put them together. All right, so 5.5 is the answer to number 1. All right, so let's do a subtraction one. Let's do number 4. Number 4 looks like a good one. Okay, so we have 8 and 1/9 minus 3 and 7/9. Okay. So remember, we do the fraction side first. All right, can you take 7/9 from 1/9? No, so we need to borrow, okay? So we need to borrow 1 whole from the 8, okay? So how many 9ths make 1 whole? 9 9ths. So we need to turn this from 8 and 1/9 to 7, because we just borrowed from the 8, 7 and 10 9ths. Okay, do I know that that is an improper fraction? Yes, but we need it to be in order to subtract. So 7 and 10 9ths minus 3 and 7 9ths. Okay, so we do the fraction side first. 10 9ths minus 7 9ths is 3 9ths. 7 minus 3, 4. Okay, so now we have 4 and 3 9ths. Can I do anything to the 3 9ths to make it smaller? I sure can. I can divide the top and the bottom both by 3 and in order to reduce it. So 4 and 3 9ths equals 4 and 1/3. Okay, because 3 9ths reduced in its simplest form becomes 1/3. So the answer is 4 and 1/3. All right. Okay, so you are going to do 473 for your homework. Okay, and let's turn over to 474. And we're going to estimate sums and differences of mixed numbers. Okay, so the best way to estimate sums and differences of mixed numbers is basically to picture it on a number line. When you're on a number line, it's like you're driving up and down, smaller and larger, okay? You can also think of it in fraction tiles if you want, okay? But estimating, a lot of times the best way to estimate is to use benchmark numbers. Remember we talked about benchmark numbers, halves, fourths, thirds, okay? So it says, how do you estimate? We're on page 424. It says, think it through. Let's look at underneath the owl. Underneath the owl. Think it through. When a number is less than halfway between two numbers, I use the lesser whole number. Okay, remember when we talked about estimating before with whole numbers? We said 5 or above, we round up. Below 5, we round down. Well, in whole numbers and mixed numbers, we can do the same thing just with halves, okay? Under half, round down, go to the lower whole number. Above half, round up. to the higher whole number. Okay. When a number is halfway or more than halfway between two numbers, I use the greater whole number. So let's look under learn. How can you estimate with mixed numbers? To estimate with mixed numbers, round the number to the nearest whole number. Okay, so you have two whole numbers. You have 2 and 3 in this example. Okay, so to the nearest whole number, so 2 1/4, 2 1/4 would round to 2. Okay, because it's less than 2 1/2. Okay, 2 1/2 rounds to 3. Okay, 2 3/4 also rounds to 3 because 1/2 and 3/4 are closer to the next whole number, which is 3. Okay, so let's look at the example. The Gomez family is driving from Albuquerque, New Mexico to Denver, Colorado. Use the times on the map to estimate the total driving time. Okay, so they are going 3 1/3 hour plus 1 1/2 hour plus 1 3/4 hours. Okay, so we're going to round them to the nearest hours and then add them together to see about how long it's going to take them to get there. Okay, so we're going to round 3 1/3 down to 3 because 1/3 is less than 1/2. Okay, but we're going to round 1 1/2 and 1 3/4 up to 2. Okay, so now we have 3 plus 2 plus 2 equals 7. Okay, so it's going to take them about 7 hours to get to Denver, Colorado from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Okay, so that is estimating to the nearest whole number. All right, so you're going to be doing that on page 475, and this is at about 17.5 minutes. So I will see you in a couple minutes if you want to hurry up and get a head start on your practice on adding and subtracting mixed numbers. You can do that, and I'll see you in a few minutes. All right, bye.